So welcome back to Outdoors with the Morgans. Big day here today, and a special delivery from Marty Parsons at Wood-Mizer. It's been a long wait for this, which it has been for everyone, but really hasn't been that bad, a little over a year. But we just got a new LT50 wide, and Marty's out here today, delivered it, left. You're an early riser, aren't you, Marty?
Yes, sir. Yep.
I told him, he said yesterday, how early is too early? I said, I'm up at 4:30, and he texted me at 5. He said he's on his way. So I said, that's good. But Marty's going to kind of go over this mill for me and for you, and we're going to kind of learn the ins and outs of it. What do you want to tell us right out of the gate here, Marty?
Well, when we pull into a landing, we're going to call this a landing, whether you're underneath a building or whether you're pulling into in the forest somewhere. We kind of make the mill common sense level. We really don't have to put a level on it. We just want bearing weight on the axle, and we want it to look kind of level. And you'll tell pretty quick. If you're going to be using the board return, you may have it leaning a little bit to the idle side, and the idle side being where the tensioner's at. So that way it'll transition the lumber away from the operator. If you tilt it the other way, then you're going to be fighting the lumber coming back to the operator. So those are kind of some things that you...
So that's a big difference right off the bat. Like that LX150, you have to set it up perfectly level, where this one, you're saying it doesn't have to be exact.
Yeah, just like I said, it's common sense. You'll know pretty quick. We want bearing weight on all 6 legs. We're going to start by setting the front 3 legs first. And machine's rated for 4,400 pounds. That's the log size or the weight of the log. Now, I think there's a lot of logs get sawed that are over that, but that's kind of avoids the warranty if there's an issue with that. But we don't see many issues with the frame or anything like that. But we do know that this big tube is built with a crown about the thickness of a dime, 30 to 50 thousandths. So,
okay.
So we're going to put bearing weight on the front and rear leg, and the other legs, you know, we're going to bring down and touch to the ground, and we could shim them up. Now this has the fine adjustable outriggers on it, so we can adjust those as we go if the machine settles. So we would come down and check that periodically, or depending on if we saw the machine move while we were sawing, we'd go back up and check the support of the legs. All
right, well, we want to start by getting her leveled up?
Yep, let's do that.
So you said there's 6 outriggers, right?
Yep. The weight's on the back now, on the opposite side of the axle, so we're going to set the front 3 legs first.
Okay.
And that just helps everything work better. We could bring the machine up front, but then we'd have to turn that extra weight.
Right, right.
Now the hydraulics will only work when we're on the first 6 foot, and we have a contact strip here. So we're going to set the front 3 legs. We're going to raise the saw head up to 27 inches to clear the loader. Then we're going to bring the saw head forward. Then we'll set our back 3 legs, and then we'll kind of look at it, and we can move the saw head around again, looking at it settled, and we'll adjust it at that point.
How long you been a Wood-Mizer dealer, Marty?
Since 2002.
Since 2002.
Seems like yesterday.
See, time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you serve Pennsylvania, West Virginia,
Virginia,
Maryland,
Delaware, some parts of New Jersey. Now, when we transported the mill, we actually engaged the auto clutch for transport. In a minute here, we're going to settle that back down. Now, we do have to be careful that the pin is actually through the hole and not just on top of the leg. Gotcha. Because if we just put it on top of the leg, it could actually break this out.
Gotcha.
So we have to be real careful of that. And we're just kind of looking back the frame tube and seeing if it's coming in level. There we go.
Front 3 are down.
So now this is a diesel engine option. This is a 35 horsepower. When I turn the key on, you're going to see this engine come back to rest. When we transported it, we actually had it engaged. And that keeps everything. If we'd hit a pothole on the highway, it could actually disconnect the linkage. So now we can actually use our Accusat, and we can go up here and hit what's called reference mode, and we can tell it to go to 24 inches, and it's going to go. No hands, see?
No hands.
Pretty cool. We can actually bring the blade guide arm out and get ready. Now when we transport it, we should have the blade tension at about 500 PSI. Swing a debarker out so we can control all this from this operator station. Now there you can see that's 24 inches, but we need to go up to about 27. And then we're going to roll the saw head forward. So now we'll go back and set the rear 3 legs. And we want to make sure that our tires and axle stay on the ground. This is the rest pin which the saw actually was transported on. We're going to swing it down and out of the way, push the pin back in, and we always know where that pin is. Now these fine adjustable outriggers do have a grease fitting on them, so periodically you do want to screw it down. There's a hole on each side to lubricate those.
This is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. Speaking of very helpful, Marty's one of them guys I have seen like on Wood-Mizer Facebook pages, 8, 9 o'clock at night, answering guys from all over the country. You might have a mill that's 30 years old and they have a question, and Marty's always got an answer.
Now we do have to watch this leg, you know, if we have a log. Right there is our travel point for the blade. So this will cut 21 foot the way it sits here. So that's what the tape mark is. There's a tape mark at the front of the frame, tape mark at the rear of the frame, and that's my 21 foot cut line.
Gotcha.
So if the log's on this side of the tape mark, we're going to have to reposition it. So what do you think? You want to go get your level, or you think that's pretty close?
I think it's pretty close.
And again, it's just common sense. Now being it'll settle a little bit on the stones, you know, the tires are on the ground, we're not spinning. But you could imagine that tire spinning, you're up on the top, on the frame,
yeah,
and then cutting a limb off or something, and your feet come down and you expect that tire to hold you.
Right. That'd be a bad.
You got a running chainsaw in your hand.
Yeah, that'd be a bad day.
Bad day. So everything looks good. So we'll run the saw head back and forth a little bit, and we'll kind of determine, see if the leg settles a little bit. Any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. Now we do have a safety chain here. This is part of the rest pin for transport. That just hangs there, and there's a loop on the saw head itself. So if it would come off the rest pin in a bad day situation, you've had an accident or something, or had a steering emergency, that chain's going to keep the saw head from slamming to the back of the saw.
Right.
Now you can see we talked about the clamp being out for transport. Again, you see the clamps out halfway. Now
yeah,
look underneath the saw, and you can see that nut's just about 4 or 5 inches from the highway. And again, that could be another bad day where you could catch that on a curb or a stump or something.
He's talking about this clamp right here. It pivots down, so.
Yep, so you want to make sure that it's always in for transport.
Yeah, bring this in, I gotcha.
Then this is your sawdust chute. There's fingers in here. We'd never want to stick our hand in here and clean that sawdust chute out, because it will gather fibers. Poplar's one species that gathers fibers. Could be anything.
Yeah.
So if you see the sawdust coming out here, you know, you want to stop, shut the machine off, and then clean that out. Okay. Now you can put a chip extractor or sawdust blower on this and blow it into another building or another area. It's going to put a windrow right here. So
right.
That's something you could add to it. And you can see we have windshield washer fluid. It was 29 degrees this morning, so if that would freeze, that would possibly take out the filter assembly, and if it's real bad, it would take out the pump. So.
Yeah, this has the, it almost injects it on. What's it called?
Lubemizer.
Lubemizer.
Yeah. So it pressurizes, and you can control that from the operator station, where you don't have to constantly mess with the valve.
Yeah, my other one was gravity, and yeah, yep.
So power feed motors here, your batteries here. We do have to keep this clear of debris. So if there's a, let's say a knot or something that fell in there, or a piece of wood, and you lower the saw head, you could actually bend that.
Right, I can see that happening, yep.
And we have our fuse block here, and there's spare fuses in the door if something would actually fail. Not real common, but you know, it's another thing that it's a possibility.
Right.
Get shorted out. This is our box for our Accusat, and then we have circuit breakers that are manually reset for safety, so we don't want those to actually turn on automatically.
You said ATF fluid, mostly the rails and everything. What about the beam right here, the post?
Yep.
Same thing?
That's your mast assembly, and there's what's called Durlin pads that slide up and down there, and that gets lubricated.
Same with ATF?
Yeah, ATF.
Okay.
Pretty much everything. The reason we use ATF because it doesn't evaporate, and like WD-40 would evaporate, and has high detergent content, and it's a good lubrication.
So as far as grease fittings, there's one up.
Well, there's a lot of grease fittings on this machine.
But the first one's up top, right? The one you showed
on
me?
the crank support, yes.
Crank support.
And everything's 50 hours.
Okay.
Yep. And then our auto clutch is another thing that cycles a lot, and you have to remove the cover to get to that. That's inside here. We're kind of jumping around.
That's all right.
There's one right here.
Yeah.
So, and you can see every time we cycle that, if you're going to come around to this side, you'll see that. So that cam works. And a lot of customers miss that grease fitting.
Yeah.
So, and that causes other problems in the future.
Right.
Then we have a forward return here that has a grease fitting on the shaft here.
Yep.
Now you see how this cable's loose?
Yeah.
So if you're not careful, you'll actually try to bring a cant back or something and you'll break that cable. When you put it down, you should count about 2 seconds and leave that cable loose. And that way that the board return's pushing on the frame, not on the cable.
Not on the cable. Gotcha. Yep.
And transport, we have the blade tension at 500 PSI. When we're sawing, you know, just like the decal says, we're gonna saw 3,000. Now, if we go over 3,000, a couple hundred pounds, it's not a big deal. Now, as soon as this is a brand new machine, so as the wheel belts wear into the wheels and the blade stretches a little bit, you will see some changes in the tension. Now, like your LX 150, you couldn't tell what was going on, but as the blade gets warm or hot, or it expands and you can actually see what's going on with the tension.
Yeah.
Now, once it makes a few revolutions there, it's going to go back to 3,000. So you can kind of see here, when we transport an LT50 or an LT70, we want the side supports down about halfway. I don't know if you can see that from where you're at. So that's about where we transport it. So the side supports come up and then the turner comes up. We don't lift it up the whole way. And then we're going to extend the loading arm cylinder. And we talked about the check valves at the bottom of each loading arm cylinder.
Yeah, you want to go over that again, Marty?
So on LT50, these are 6 gallon per minute check valves that could actually fail if you actually have a rock here or something when we drop it down, or it actually freezes into the ground. So we want to make sure, that's a safety thing, and we want to make sure we don't replace that with anything but the right part.
Yeah, that way if you have a problem, something would fail, that's not going to drop the log when it's halfway up on somebody's leg or something.
Would fail, like I said, it's rated for 4,400 pounds, and you know, and we don't see many hose failures. I don't even stock hydraulic hoses because either the customer gets them locally or you know, we don't have a lot of hydraulic issues.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna, we have the turner up just up about 4 inches, and we're just gonna push this against the stops and unhook the chain, and we're gonna lower this down. Now, if you don't have the cylinders expanded completely, you're gonna find out that it's gonna be a lot of weight in your lower back.
Right.
So now when you're ready to move to the next location, just put your shoulder under there, bring it up, put the chain up, put the side supports down and the turner down, close the loader, and it's ready to go again. So
Yep.
realistically, it's about 15 minutes turnaround time
Yeah.
to your truck again. So hydraulics are in here. There's actually 2 hydraulic pumps that are 12 volt, and they work really well. There are brushes in the hydraulic motor that should be checked about 850 hours. You can run them through anywhere between 14 and 2,000, but then you'll probably need a motor because it'll do damage to the motor because all that carbon is in there grinding around.
Right.
But the brushes are fairly easy to change. So again, definitely some information. You can buy the pumps too and have a spare one, but again, it's a lot of sawing. You know, it's not going to happen in a few years.
Right.
Depends on what you're doing. Like I said, 800 hours to check the brushes and about 1,400 hours to replace them. Wood-Mizer has guides in the manual that'll tell you what to do daily, bi-weekly, and every 50-hour intervals. So that's pretty cool how that works out too.
Yeah.
Now the side supports on this machine are 14 inches from the bed rail, and the scales actually yell to help you remind you of that. The 40s and probably the LX 150, I think they're 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is what it is. Yeah.
So there's nothing to keep you from hitting the side supports, the turner, the clamp, or the loader. And we could actually catch the loader with the blade out arm. So
Right.
we do have to be careful of that, so we can't be sleeping when we're on the saw.
Right.
And this is a little bit faster than...
I'm
your
sure
LX
it's a lot faster.
And we can control that with the potentiometer. And then return speed, you have a ramp up. So if you just touch the drum switch and stop, it goes kind of slow. But the longer you hold the drum switch down, it ramps up and comes to full speed. Now we don't have any control on return speed. We could actually hook up the H bridge. There's a connecting wire there where you could actually control return speed, but not many folks do that. Operators do that. You want it to come back after a while as quick as it'll go.
Now, do we want to put these back on the jacks? And why do we? What are those for?
What happens to the fine adjustable outriggers, especially on concrete? These screws will actually back off.
Okay.
And so we have these little pieces of metal that we can put on there.
It keeps them from.
We have a little clip to keep them from getting lost. And this table's part of the board return, so that forces the lumber to come back up over the hydraulic box. And if you have somebody operating or off-bearing for you, you want to make sure that they don't put their hand down there, because that would be another bad day.
Right, right.
Okay. LT50 has the bi-directional turner, the dual plane clamp. Now our last cut's 1 inch, and this head actually rotates, and this head of this clamp's actually 1 inch also. Now a lot of times once we get the cant squared, we're not going to use the turner, we're going to use the clamp. And it's as fast or faster than the turner. So it depends on what your application is and what you're doing. We have the side supports that go up a little bit higher, and we do have auxiliary side supports here.
For little short
cants. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I didn't even notice that. That's nice. Yeah.
So again, if you're doing short stuff, and then Wood-Mizer just came out with the cookie miser, which if you want to do rounds, cookies and stuff, you could get them out and put it right on the machine.
I've done those before. I always just screwed them to like a couple boards, you know what I mean, and then I'd ratchet strap around all of them. I never had a problem with it, but I'd set it right on the deck that way. And then the cookies things, people are crazy about those cookies.
Yeah. I remember delivering a mill one time, and they had a wedding venue there. The granddaughter was doing that, and I went over to the firewood pile. She says, I need to make some plate cookies. I'm like, well, how many do you need? Well, I just paid $4 a piece for them. I think I needed like 25 or 30 of them. I was over and grabbed a piece of firewood and stuck it in there and clamped it up, and I was going to pick them off. She's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So she could see dollar signs that she was saving. So. We have a mud saw debarker as an option here. It cuts a 1/4 inch kerf right in front of the blade, which is adjustable.
People always ask, that's one of the, I don't know why, but that's what people ask most about, is the debarker I had on the LX150. The purpose, I've explained it, but extends the life of the blade by cleaning debris off of the bark.
Yeah, Mother Nature made the bark even abrasive, so even though you say, well, there's no mud on the log, I don't need that, we do use the debarker a lot because just like think about hickory bark, how hard that is.
Yeah.
But every bark is abrasive to keep the insects from penetrating the tree. So if we get that bark off there, it's really going to, save our blade life. We usually say 500 board feet without a debarker and 800 board feet with a debarker, so it definitely is a big savings.
Right.
And again, as being the sales on the sales side, a lot of times they're always going, I don't need a debarker, and you're going, okay. Are you dragging your logs with a tractor or a machine? And they're going, well, yeah. And you're not picking your logs up, so well, you're probably going to need a debarker. Well, I'll pressure wash them. Well, pressure washer just makes such a mess, but I know it's another option for you.
Yeah.
Not anything else, but man,
if
you can just put the log on there, and we'll probably, show you how this works here in a little bit, but it really is a big savings. Yeah.
Right.
So this will cut 21 foot cutting length, 36 inches high, 34 wide, and we can close the blade guide arm up, 2 to 4 inches away from the cut is where we should try to be, and that gives you a lot of protection. The blade should be stopped when we're not sawing, so really the only thing is exposed 2 to 4 inches on each side of the log. So we want to make sure we train everybody to stay on the back of the saw head for safety. Now there are times where people do off bear from the other end, and we want to have a visual communication. So thumbs up, my hands are off the controls, put your hands up.
Right.
If somebody's helping you out, and just make sure that everybody understands what that is. So, probably the biggest issue you see is people getting their fingers smashed because they reach in and the operator has to pull the hydraulic lever, and the hydraulics definitely win.
Right.
So yes, the Yanmar diesel engine has DPF on it. It runs an alternator which charges the battery. The battery's AGM battery, which is a good battery for vibration, really works well. We have a crank support kit there. It has a grease fitting on it. We change the oil at 250 hours. Just refer to the manual there to get the proper oil. Most of the time we run 1540 Rotella, but yeah, there's some other oils out there too, whatever fits in that recommendation. This blade guide arm slides in and out. It's adjustable, and that's the thing we have to be careful of. A lot of customers set the blade on the log. Like they'll go up to the log and they want to drop it down to 16th, but they have their Accusat on and they touch that drum switch down.
It's coming down.
It's coming down, yep. And it will make this loose. And if we have this loose, then that's going to really affect how it cuts. And we do a lot of alignments, and that's probably something that we see, and it's amazing how much better the saw works, you know.
What blade do you have on here now?
747. That's a 45 thousandths inch and a quarter, 747 hook angle.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most common blades for anybody in production, and it cuts a wide variety of woods in Pennsylvania anyway. You know, your softwood, your hardwood.
Yeah.
It works really well. Yeah.
Okay.
This is referred to as the idle side. They have
the idle side.
This is idle side wheel, and we just bring this off. We should never run the machine without the covers on, of course. And we have a loose fitting belt, which is not common to see a machine with a loose fitting belt, but that belt actually vibrates and keeps the sawdust from building up. There are times when we rotate the wheel belts from the drive side over there to the idle side, and we actually invert it, so most of the wear edges towards the outside of the belt.
I never knew the answer why I knew they're supposed to be loose, but is that what it is? It vibrates the sawdust out of it.
Sawdust off. And again,
I didn't know that.
If we had a 56 on there, or there are some other companies that make a different belt, then you have to cut the belt off if there's something gets stuck in there.
Yeah.
And we can push the debarker out of the way, and then we have our middle cover, and we also have a metal throat screw here, as if something did get caught underneath the belt, or there's deviation in the belt when it was manufactured. If the blade would oscillate, it would come down and hit that pin.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Now the teeth should always face the sawdust chute at the bottom. Now this has an optional high performance guide blocks, which are sandwich guides, and I always kind of tease everybody about they help a dull blade saw. But there's about 10 thousandths clearance between the blade and that little block, and they're adjustable. They can be problematic if you actually are not up to date on keeping your blade clean. So if you can think about the blade being 45 thousandths thick and you have that clearance there, then all of a sudden you put some pine sap on that, or you know, ash and hickory have a lot of sap also. Any log could produce sap, but then the blade starts to get thick, and then it rubs on the plates and creates heat or friction, and then all of a sudden you can't keep your blade tight.
Right.
Look up there and say, oh wow, you know.
Yep.
My blade's really dirty. So again, that hydraulic blade tensioner on the 40s and 50s really help you out as a tool. As we're sawing, we kind of monitor that. So if the blade tension stabilizes, we're good. If we can't keep the blade tight, it's usually related to some problem. Oh, I forgot to put the lube on.
Right.
My blade's getting dirty with pine sap, or my blade's dull. I might hit a stone. I just put the blade on. It's still not working. And then you find out that there's a stone embedded in the log, and all the teeth are rounded off. So,
right.
So it's pretty good. These clips are here in case the cover came loose in transport. So if you had the clip in there, then the door couldn't fall the whole way off, or the cover couldn't fall off. That's what that little clip's for. This is the drive side here. Now the idle side has a sealed bearing on it, and the drive side has an oil bath bearing. There's actually a clear plastic hose from the top of the bearing to the bottom of the bearing, which you can't really access until you take the cover off. But that bearing's about $450, but the hose is about $1.25. So every year, or a little bit more maybe, you should replace the hose and replace the oil inside that bearing.
Right.
I think the book calls for $500, but I think we see a lot of moisture gets in there and condensation, especially machines that sit outside. So that's something that's definitely inexpensive
Preventative maintenance there. Yeah, yeah.
So there you go. We have the blade. It's tension to 3,000 pound right now, and we call that strain. So talk about the tension of the blade, but we're actually stretching that blade to a certain amount. And we have a tool that we can put on there, and we can actually check that if we're suspicious of a problem. But again, there's not many issues with that. But if I'm working on a non-Wood-Mizer mill, actually, because you'll see a tension gauge or you'll see a die spring there, and you're trying to determine how tight the blade is or how much strain is on it, and you'd be surprised that they're not strained hardly at all. So
Really?
yeah.
Now, as far as the blades on the wheels, that's proper setup right there. I always see
Yes.
people ask that question, how far in or out the blade's supposed to go, but you just want those teeth right at the edge of the wheel,
You
right?
could imagine if the blade was hanging out on the wheel, we would put the tension across the body. The more tension we put across the tooth, is that's what's doing the work.
Right.
So I always try to center the band on the belt or on the wheel. So there are some applications that actually have steel wheels. So that's called tracking. Now again, Wood-Mizer makes their C-frame so heavy that very rarely would you have to change the tracking. If the tracking changes, it's usually related to the wheel belts, because the wheel belts are worn and the band starts to kiss the wheel, and that'll cause blade breakage and different things. So as we check the blade, we want to maintain a clearance between the flange of the roller and the blade. It's 1/16 on the drive side, 1/8 on the idle side. And you really don't have to have a measurement. You just know that that flange of that roller in the very first groove is 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
So half the distance on this, which is the drive side, and a full gap on the away from the flange of the roller on the idle side.
I'm going to be going back and watching this video over and over again.
Good. So we're just going to take the blade off here quick. We're going to back the tension off. Now in the manual, this is called the chrome tension rods, and they slide in and out on the C-frame. And we're just going to go back to 0, and we're going to give this an extra 4 or 5 turns. Now there is a grease fitting here that you can lubricate the threads, and there's actually a ball on the end of this tensioner that actually pushes in on a piston. So we do want to keep that greased periodically. We also have a chain for our blade guide arm, which should also be lubricated at 50 hours. So
Yeah. Oh, yep.
again, if you look in here, you can kind of see these bolts are cams, and we could adjust that. Now there's a procedure in the manual to do that. So if you just turn the cam down and make your blade guide arm tight, it's not going to be correct. So we want the blade to run parallel to the bed rail. And again, I'm not going to go into alignment, but that's something that, you know, we would try to help you out. If you had a problem, give us a call.
Right.
So we can just take that blade off. We should have safety glasses and gloves on. Take the blade off, kind of bring it together like a pretzel. And a lot of times it's probably better if you don't have a helper, because if someone pulls
Exactly.
the blade,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Now there's a BOB, it's not bring your own beer, it's blade on backwards, and we could actually invert this blade, put it on there, and a lot of people have experienced chainsaws that are going the wrong direction, so it's the same thing.
That wouldn't
And I've
cut real
actually
well.
done it before. I actually had a film crew come out one time, and I was going to really show them how it cut, and it wouldn't cut anything. So, I just said, shut your camera off just 1 second till I fix this. So.
You got an edit button on that? Yeah. Yeah.
So that's BOB, that's blade on backwards. And you could need a vacation if you happen to watch. But we very rarely we see that anymore, because most of the time, if you get Wood-Mizer blades, they're actually shipped in a ring with a steel clip on there, and we take one blade out at a time, and very rarely we see the blade inverted. Now there are some setters out there that require you to invert the blade to change the set on the other side, and that's where we used to do that in the early days, where we had to flip the blade over to change the set, and that's where you get the blade on backwards a lot.
How many sharpenings, how many blades do you sharpen out there at your place, your guys?
We sharpen about 500 to 800 blades a week. And right now we're about 3 to 4 weeks out.
Okay.
It goes in cycles, but we have a good team there now that are really pounding some blades out. So
Very cool.
So Wood-Mizer makes about 15 miles of blades a day. So there is a chance of failures happening. If it breaks at the weld, it could be under warranty if it's not been sharpened. It could break at the gullet, which is a flex life issue. So every time that band goes around that 19-inch wheel, it's putting a hairline fracture in the gullet. And you see a lot of times customers are actually trying to sharpen their blades with a Dremel tool. Well, they're not grinding the gullet and removing that crack. So as that crack forms and it gets deeper and deeper,
Yeah.
that makes the band fail. So if you call me and say, hey Marty, you know, I'm breaking blades, I'll say, well, did it break at the weld? No. Did it break at the gullet? Yep. And then we'll go through a procedure to say, well, you know, how many board feet have you sawed? Well, I've sawed 4 logs. And you're going, well, how big are your logs? Are they 4 foot long, or are they 36 inches in diameter? Or are you cutting 21 foot? So we try to use board footage there.
Right.
So again, the 500 to 800 board feet per sharpening is what we're talking about. And Wood-Mizer makes the CBN wheel, which does a profile grind. So it'll grind the tooth, it'll grind the gullet and removes the crack, and it grinds the back of the tooth, which also helps that out. So we can also have cracks form on the smooth side, which that would be back to the flange of the roller that we talked about. So the tracking had changed a little bit, the wheel belts had probably been worn, maybe a bearing's come loose a little bit, and it pushes that blade up against the flange of the roller, and it makes that blade so hot that it actually fails from the back forward. So if there's a lot of cracks on the smooth side,
right.
Now again, and we're here to help you, so just give us a call and say, hey, Marty, we're breaking blades, and then we'll walk through what's maybe causing it.
Mm-hmm.
Wood-Mizer blades have a serial number on them, and they just started actually putting the hook angle on there. If you can kind of see that, it says 747.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So that's always the question is, you know, when you bring blades back for the sharpening service, do I need to separate them? Just put them in the box, we'll take care of the separation. But a lot of customers are like, well, I got my blades back, and we do tag them, put a little white tag on there, so this is your 4s, this is your 9s, this is your 747s. So, but now they're starting to brand the blade with that. Now, again, how many of these blades are branded, I'm not sure. Some you see, some you don't, so I'm not sure where the cycle is. But these blades also have an ID number, and if the blade actually fails, we actually have to have that blade ID number, and then we determine whether we need to ship it back to Wood-Mizer and get them.
Yeah, if they had a batch or something, an issue or something.
They can tell what machine actually welded it. The ID number has nothing to do with the hook angle. So if you give them the ID number, this is the blade I need, they'll be like, well, we need to see the blade. So again, this is 45 thousandths inch and a quarter. We could run an 1.5 inches, but again, in my opinion, it's probably a waste of money. I'd probably get in trouble for some people, but this is the most common blade out. We saw a lot of equipment, and yeah, it's a really good blade. This is a double hard series. There are some other blades. Silver tip would be a less expensive blade, more higher carbon content. There's also bimetal blades, and there's carbide blades. Carbide blades are good to a point, but they won't cut metal, number one, and number two is they're expensive. So if you're getting your trees from a tree service, which is very common, and you hit a nail, you'll probably hate life, because it's going to be, this blade's probably $150
per carbide. Yeah,
but it does cut smooth. It's like a planer. But if you're making guitar tops for Gibson, yeah, it's a good choice, because you got $50-$60 in a little piece of wood.
Yeah,
and you can, I mean, there's a customer down towards Philadelphia that's selling, I think he's going like 10 thousandths cuts. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that blade just performs really well for that application. So. All right, we're just going to put this blade back on. Get started in there. Get it set in our guides. And you can see these loose fitting belts. We just pick that up and slide it over. Just slide this wheel out. Make sure the band's kind of centered in the wheel. We don't want the band to be riding on the belt, because the belt will actually get cut from the gullet. So we're just going to squeeze that back with our hand, and then we're just going to increase our tension.
transport 500, operating 3,000.
Yep. And don't be afraid to go a little bit over 3,000. Like I said, once the blade tracks here a little bit, it's going to back off. So there we go. Close our center cover. And if these get, it's amazing, some of these get so tight. A little bit of never sees, lubricate the threads. Really works that well. A little rubber grommet there to help stop vibration. Bring it inside this cover, and we use our hands on the handle. Stick that in. Close our cover up. Make sure there's just a little bit of a rib around the outside. Put our safety clip in, and we're ready to go. Over to the drive side. We're going to come push the debarker out of the way, and we're going to come from the idle side over. Clip down the bottom. There we go. We're ready to go again. We're going to talk about lubrication. We're going to start here with the middle track roller. Every 25 hours, we're going to take this off. There's actually felt that continually wipes this rail off. And again, we're trying to get that transmission fluid so we don't have the sawdust, and sawdust actually has gluten in it, so if it builds up, it'll actually build up on the bearing, and it could actually slow the feed rate down and cause problems. So that's why we're constantly lubricating that top rail. Now the bottom rail we're going to have to lubricate manually. So every 8 hours you can take a Dawn dishwasher liquid container filled with transmission fluid, put it on the top, wipe it off, take that rag, soak it in transmission fluid, and wipe the bottom rail off. We actually have a ground brush that constantly rubs on the bottom rail for the hydraulics. So if that would actually get rusty or something from the machine sitting outside, then it could actually ground through the power feed chain and could cause an issue there.
Right.
So we did talk a little bit about the grease fitting for the board returns here. We have auxiliary bed rails in which we can slide in and support a short log, or we can slide out and support a long log. I always pull this up and actually force the grease out the top. If you just leave it down there, the grease goes to the bottom and you don't get that little bit of sawdust out.
Gotcha, yeah.
It'll actually get moisture in there and it'll actually rust.
Yep.
Then we have our toe boards, which we have one at the rear and one at the front. There's no grease fittings on that, but you can put transmission fluid on the bearings here and all the pivot points, and again, keep that lubricated. Our side supports on a 50 and a 70 lubricate. There's actually a bushing inside this piece of metal, or the boss. So we lubricate this shaft with transmission fluid and transmission fluid on our rollers to help the log roll over. Grease fittings on our linkage here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grease fittings just on that side support. If you let your maintenance get down, these are a huge maintenance issue if you let the grease fittings go bad, or it all gums up in there. And I've had to take on the 70s, they have a hydraulic box in here and you have to cut that all apart with a torch, and it's not a good day. So 50 hours, keep that greased. Our auxiliary side supports have grease fittings on those.
I really like that. The short logs can be a real pain in the neck sometimes trying to,
Then we have our clamp, which also has a bushing here, and then we have a grease fitting here. I want to lubricate this clamp head. Now the clamp head's not the cylinder for up and downs right here. We do have to be careful with that so that we don't bend it. And where you would get that bend is if the log would roll out on your loader and come back in and hit the cylinder. That's another uh-oh moment. We have the chain here, and we want the chain to be loose enough to actually go around the log. So this will be tight for a little bit, but it will actually loosen up. We have a grease fitting for the pivot point for that, and we can actually lubricate the links of the chain with transmission fluid. And we're back to the auxiliary bed rail again, and then we have our linkage again for the side supports. Lubricate the bushing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grease fittings on that linkage kits.
This off subject, but that tape mark is where the head goes to for transport, correct?
The rest pin, yes.
And that'll line up with that rest pin.
And again, you can push the saw head back just a little bit. It's hard to try to hit that without some experience there. But you get close to that and then come back and be careful about lowering that down. And then we're back to the auxiliary bed rail again. Now you can see the bed rails are all adjustable. And this is probably a pet peeve, but the only bed rails I ever adjust is the ones customers adjusted before they called me. Okay, so, and what that means is you're sawing along and all of a sudden you make a flat side, you flip the flat side down, and you realize that the wood is not touching some of the bed rails, and you think, wow, my bed rails are out of adjustment. It's not so, it's actually stressing the wood. So then you get your little handy dandy Craftsman toolbox out and you start adjusting things, and you really get things messed up.
Yeah.
So always call Wood-Mizer and say, hey, I think I have a problem, my bed rails are out of adjustment. And if you call me, I'm going to say, don't touch the bed rails. It's usually a sawing problem related to wood stress, not related to bed rails. These frames are heavy duty, and again, there's mills out there with thousands and thousands of hours that have never had the bed rails touched. So
I think wood stress is a problem that a lot of people don't realize, and they think it's something wrong with the mill. I've had boards peel up like a banana, you know what I mean? And everything's under tension and stress in some of those logs, and next thing you know, you think there's something wrong with your adjustments. And
so back to lubrication, we have a power feed chain on this side. Again, everything's transmission fluid. Anything else like motor oil, used motor oil, becomes an attractant to sawdust. So Dextron 3 transmission fluid is what the book calls for. If your buddy down the road says, oh, you need to use this material or that material, you can use it, but you could actually cause other problems just related to sawdust sticking to it.
Right.
We do have the up and down chain here, also lubricated. The transmission fluid again. In under here is where we'd access the main bearing for the drive system. There's a little plastic hose that goes from top to bottom. There's a grease fitting for the up and down that runs on this pulley and gear shaft, but it's really only supposed to be greased at 1,000 hours, so it's not something we really have to pay a lot of attention to.
Okay.
We do hit it if we were doing a service, but now the mast pads are adjustable, and again, the odds of you adjusting them, you can see about the thickness of a credit card between this Sterling pad is what it's called, and the mast itself.
Yep.
And you can kind of think about the weight is on the outside, plus it's leaning forward, so you have clearance on this pad, and you have clearance on that pad on the inside.
Yeah, yeah.
My recommendation is don't touch it unless you really think there's a problem, but
I'll go with that recommendation.
don't touch it. We have a fuse center here for the diesel, and your ECM's in here. The computer's here for the engine. Not many issues with that. Water separator filter for our lube tank. Linear transducer. This little chrome rail is how Accusat works. So as the magnet slides up and down the rail, it puts voltage back to the Accusat.
Okay.
And that tells us, that's how it knows where it is in relationship to 12 inches.
Yeah.
So higher voltage or lower voltage. And we can talk about calibrating the head and that. Let's talk about hydraulic oil. In this tank, with all cylinders closed, we can actually check the 2 levels of the hydraulic pumps. The reservoirs are actually hooked together, so you really only need to check 1. We don't put any hydraulic oil in it out of a farm tractor. The heaviest oil we put in there is Dextron 3. Wood-Mizer does sell some thinner oil, which is actually aircraft oil, that actually does work in cold climates, which a lot of customers, we change that over at the beginning because they want it to be faster. And it is a couple seconds faster in cycle times.
Right.
You can do that, but it's $50 a gallon. So this holds about 2.5 gallons in the system. So you could actually increase your hydraulic times by changing that oil. But
Right.
this depends on what the application is. But the biggest thing is we don't put like tractor oil, AW46. I mean, it just kills the pump. Yeah, makes it real slow.
Gotcha.
See, this is telling me that we're 16 and 15, 30 seconds from the bed rail. That's the Accusat. And we can actually press this arrow down button when we're in manual mode, and it's going to take us to the closest whole number.
Gotcha.
So if it's 16 and a half or more, it would take us to 17.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So our lasers here, our debarker in and outs here, which we control. And I always say these switches are with my left hand, these switches with my right hand, and we will see customers that will actually do this, and you're going, okay,
Yeah.
so whatever works for you. So, and then this is a power feed drum switch. We're going to push this forward, and then we control it with the potentiometer. The more we turn it, the faster it'll go. And then we actually lift it up with this drum switch. Now the drum switch requires some maintenance to it. Wood-Mizer actually puts a little tube of grease in here. So every 50 hours, you should actually take these 8 screws out, pull it out. You'll see a little white cup of grease in there, and then you're going to put a little grease on the contact points of the drum switches. Now the super hydraulic actually controls what's called an H-bridge, so there's not a lot of arcing going on. But you go to a standard hydraulic, which all the amps is through the switch, you will actually see some arcing, and you should lubricate that probably more than a super.
I'm relieved to see that this is all pretty, I mean, there's a lot more on this one, but the controls are just like my other one,
Right.
basically.
Yep. And we also have auto clutch now, which we flip this button up, it pulls the engine up, it comes up to full RPM, which is 3650, the blade's running. When we disengage it, the engine comes back to rest, it puts the brake on, the band should stop. Anytime the band would not stop, that means you have a problem, and that's a safety issue. So we want to try to address that. Yep. We have an hour meter here. It says 0.5 right now.
And these are all the things that I've been missing right here, Marty.
Yep, I guarantee you, you'll love life.
Yeah.
The Lubemizer system, we didn't talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
So the Lubemizer system works in conjunction with the power feed drum switch. So we have off in the center, we have pulse, and we can actually change how much it pulses. And we can kind of think about the pulse almost like a turn signal flasher, where we can actually change how many times the pump comes on. So we have the key switch on, we push this forward, you'll see the green light come on, and then we can turn this up to where it's actually, and you can see
I can hear it.
lube coming out there on
Yep.
the blade. Now it's putting lubrication on the top and bottom of the blade both. And we can slow that down to almost nothing.
That's nice. It's like pressure washing the blade, basically. You know,
If you're going through the cut and all of a sudden you see the blade tension back off, that means you create heat, and you can reach up and hit that button on continuous, and if you see the blade tension go back up, it's okay, then you can actually flip back on a pulse and maybe increase your pulses.
Right.
And see if you can get that blade tension to stabilize. Now the mud solid debarker also works in conjunction with the forward drum switch, and you can see it's spinning there. There's actually a light that's flashing.
Yep.
Light flashing. And we can control that, and there's actually a brake on there to keep the debarker from pushing out at the same. And we can turn it off when we're not using it. When we have a clean face, we can push the debarker out of the way, and we can not use it. Change it. There's a wrench. You can actually look at your fault codes, reset the maintenance timer, engine settings, regeneration, display. You can do some different things there. You can also change ash load, soot load, inlet temperature, outlet temperature, fresh air, barometric pressure, battery voltage, coolant temperature, engine hours.
Now, when this wants to do a regen, does it let you know on this screen here?
This light, this is actually a light right here, and it'll actually turn on.
Okay.
Yep. And then that would come on if there was a code.
Can you saw during that process?
Yes.
You can.
Right on going. Yep.
Okay.
It's better if you actually run the engine up to 4 RPM at 3650, so it burns it out.
Right.
Yep.
Because that's what I was going to ask. There's no way to increase those RPMs if you're, how do you increase the RPMs
do it
without?
automatically also.
Okay, so if you
But the
say
problem
you just
is the belt, the engine drive belt's loose, and the pulley's rubbing on that. So if it was mine, I would just engage the.
makes sense. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
And you want to try to stay around the machine for safety, or push it up against the log or something where nobody could get to the blade, or take the blade off. I think when we had the laptop hooked to it and we were doing a forced regen, we just took the blade off and left it run.
Yeah. Well, you know your stuff, Marty.
I don't know about all that, but yeah, just a regular guy. Yeah.
You do. What was your background before you started?
I was a diesel mechanic for PennDOT.
Yeah.
I had 17 years in before I retired. So never in a million years thought I'd be selling Wood-Mizers.
How many years has it been now?
Since 2002. So.
Yeah.
And I retired in 2006. Yeah. I told my wife we figured we'd sell 1 mil a month. That's 12 mils a year. We sold 68 mils the first year, and I told my wife we flooded the market. We're never going to sell another one. My vision wasn't quite where it is today. So.
How many did you sell last year? Do you know?
No idea.
A lot.
Yeah, right now we probably have $5 million worth of open orders.
Yeah.
And it's just it's hard to try to figure out. You know, with a lot of calls, customers are calling, want to know where their mills are. You know, when the mill will arrive, and you just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, the engines are backlogged. There's some different parts that are backlogged. So I think you had mentioned something about radiators they were having trouble getting. So there's always some little thing. They'll have a run, manufacture a bunch of equipment, then they'll be sitting out there till they get some little piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I really like about Wood-Mizer is guys like Marty and Jack. I know him up in New York. You know, these are a lot of money. They're a big investment, but it makes you feel good. Like I can text Marty, boom, he's right on it. Any issue that you have, and usually it's an issue with the operator. You know what I mean? But any questions you have, you know how to.
It's always nice to be able to bounce that off somebody else that has experienced it before. You can say, well, do this, this, and this, and we at least get you started in the right direction.
Yeah.
So if you know, there are some people that put some things on social media that aren't true or half truth. Or
see, I've never seen that before.
Have you steered in the wrong direction, and you're going, well, you know, this is probably not going to work out too well. So that's why I try to watch that and see if I can help folks. You know.
Yeah.
And I always try to end it with hopes this helps to try to visualize what's going on for the customer, what he's actually experiencing. So,
yeah, Dean always has a lot of good things to say about you as well. You've helped him a lot over the years.
So on the 40s and 50s, we have a standard quarter scale and a grade quarter scale. This isn't for our older folks like me, and this is not for people that have really good vision, 2020. So this distance between this 4/4 and this 4/4 is 1 1/8. And we're going to get a 1-inch board. And again, when we communicate with somebody, let's say we were talking to somebody that was in another state and they want all their lumber to be 4/4. Well, you better be asking them what 4/4 means to them. Is it 1 inch or is it 1 1/8? Because the distance between this 4/4 and this 4/4 is 1 1/4, and our lumber product is going to be 1 1/8.
Right.
And that would be more for customers that are putting their material through the kiln process, or they have maybe a fence board that they're trying to keep a big cow in or something. You know, it's going to give them a little bit more thickness on their lumber.
Right.
And again, if you can communicate to that to a person, say, okay, we need 3,000 board foot of 4/4 red oak, and you're going, okay, are you going to use it in a kiln? Is it grade stuff, or is it FAS, or is it going to be used in a pallet operation? So that you can actually communicate and actually get them the right lumber. So
right.
Communication is key in any business, and that's what we try to do. And you have that choice. Now with the Accusat, you can saw anything within a 30-second, and you can even tailor it on down to 1/1000 of an inch if you want to change the kerf setting. So that works out real well. So on a 40 or 50 with Accusat, you probably won't use this scale. If you try to follow the 4/4 mark on this with the Accusat at 1 1/8, you're going to find out that we figure this is a 1/4 inch kerf, and we're actually figuring 96 thousandths on a 45 thousandths blade from the Accusat. So they're not going to hit every time. It's going to be a little bit less.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yep. How about I bring that white oak over here and we try her out?
Okay, let's get her done.
All right, Marty, what do we got going on here?
Okay, let's talk about Accusat. So with your LX150, you had simple set works.
Yes.
So simple set works measured from when you turn it on to when it goes down. Now we're going to bring this up and we're going to turn the key on. And you can see we can actually change the backlight by holding the button down when we first turn on. See, it actually goes away.
Yeah,
and we're going to bring that back up. Now anytime we do that, we have to save that setting. So once you let go of it, then it'll come back here. So we're going to go to the arrow up button from manual mode, and that's going to take us to what's called the configuration menu. And we can save that setting twice. So now next time we cycle the key, it's going to stay there at that light, that backlight.
Okay.
Back to the configuration menu, we can calibrate the head, and we press that. We would actually physically measure from the bottom set tooth on the drive side to the bed rail, and we would actually lower it down to where we actually measured it with a ruler at 12 inches. We'd press that button. Now we don't want to press the button now because we're at 16/11/16. It would tell the Accusat that it was at 12, which we don't want it to do.
Right, right.
We also have gradient, which is a number on the linear transducer, and that's another thing we would save if we had some issue. Now we can exit out of that to get out of that, but we can also go in and set kerf. So if we're running a 45 thousandths blade, we're going to run 96 thousandths. If we're running a 55 thousandths blade, we'd run 110. We can talk about different things of the blade some other time, but we can back out of that. The other thing we can do is we can go to other. Now language can be changed, so I'm not going to go in there and change it, but we could do English, French, German, other, Spanish, English, Polish, other, so Portuguese. There is no Pennsylvania Dutch in there though. So
no Yinzer stuff in there either.
But diagnostics, we can do units, we can do metric. PID values is something that would be an engineering thing where we were having some little issue. We could go in there and actually fine tune it. Very rarely would you ever do that, but we do have a different PID setting for standard hydraulic and a different PID setting for super hydraulic because the motor amperage is different.
Yeah.
But diagnostics is cool because you'd come up and say, check breaker and cable. You could communicate with me on the phone and we could actually say, oh wow, the battery voltage is 0. We need to go in and check the solenoid. So again, those are things that we can do. We can check motor current. I don't know if you can see that or not. We can check the potentiometer as we turn that up. You see a little X going across there. So if it would jump from here to here, and you were talking about, well, every time I start the saw runs away from me, we could say, okay, the potentiometer's bad. So we could communicate on the phone, and then we could do feed current. So if there's a bearing out, you can see the amperage goes up.
Yep.
And then motor current for up and down. So that was way up into the hundreds. Wow, we haven't lubricated the mast in a while. There's a bearing out very rarely, but
you
that's
learn a
something.
lot from that. Yeah.
So again, it's a communication thing again. So with your simple setworks, you had 2 settings. We had 16.
Ooh, okay.
You could program it 16 different settings. Now your most popular one that you're going to saw with is going to be on program 1. And so we're going to put the value that we want our lumber to be in. So you talked about 1 inch, but we could make it anything within a 30-second. And it's going to, whenever I turn it on, it's going to go down that 1 1/8 plus the kerf, which is 96 thousandths. So we can go use the hand button. We have reference mode. We can tell it to go to 1 inch, 12, 24, 31, or we could actually fine tune that. We could make that 31, 17 1/4 just by pressing that button. And then we could go maybe flip the log. We want to come back to that face. It's a reference. Just going to cycle the key so it doesn't remember that. So we're going to saw this log, this white oak log, into 1 inch boards the whole way through, random width.
Yep.
So let's go in and set a program. So we're going to go to auto down, which is 1 inch, and that's where we're going to be, and that's going to be our product. Just remember that auto down or set down is the same as your set work. So it's going to start from where I line the blade up, and it's going to drop down to the bottom. Pattern cut is going to be measuring from the bed rail up. So once we put the flat side down, we're going to use
we'll go to pattern cut, and it'll okay.
So let's just go down to the next one. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is there. So we're just going to set this one up, and we're going to say we want 1/8, and we're going to actually scroll this up to 8 inches, and it would actually stop right at 8 inches. It would figure every cut from 8 inches up plus the kerf.
Right.
So there we go. We're at 8 inches.
So that's saying 8 inches right there, but that's figuring the kerf each time.
Yep, and it would stop at 8. So let's just go down a little closer. So let's just start at 11. So flat side down, first cut's going to be a slab, and it's telling me, it's got a little arrow there, and it's telling me how many cuts I have above 8. We can pick up, it's going to go down to the next one. So 11, 10, 3/16, 9, 3, 30 seconds, and it's going to go to 8, and it's going to stop. So it knows where it is in relationship to the bed rail.
Right.
And you can program at any block size at the bottom. So 7x9 tie, something like that. So
right.
Really works out well for that. So we're going to load this white oak log. We have the side supports up, which would be, again, we have to make sure that's up. And we're going to bring that log up, and we want to make sure the log's going to hit the side supports. Now we want the loader to be level with the deck. That way if the log would get away from us, it would land in that cradle or in that loader, and it wouldn't possibly injure somebody that wasn't paying attention.
Right.
So we can bring the taper up, take half the taper out of a non-grade log, total taper out of the grade log. You have 4 faces on the log, it just depends on what you're doing. And then we can actually clamp the log and hold it in place. Now, the question is whether we can rotate the log that way or this way. This is going to be the most common rotation. If you turn it the other way, it may not work as well, depending on what you're trying to do.
Right.
So judging your taper, if you kind of stand back and look through the box from where I'm standing at,
yeah, you can kind of see better from back here. Now,
you can see the side supports in the box, okay? And you can see how much space is between the side supports and the top of the log at the back, and you're trying to make that the same.
Right.
Now again, there's different ways of taking the taper out depending on what you're doing. So again, your face of your log, it depends on what kind of grade lumber you're doing, whether you're doing pallet lumber, whether you're doing grade lumber, whether you're trying to get character wood, which is very popular now with the live edge.
Right.
So there's different ways of doing it. So now we're just going to go up to the log, and we're going to determine our opening cut. Now, if Melissa's actually off bearing, you give her a heavy slab, he's probably going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, I know, right?
So,
yeah.
So you're kind of thinking about that. It is a Wood-Mizer, so we want to try to think about the opening of our cut. So we want a 6-inch face, a 4-inch face, or we're trying to do the widest cut we can, and we can use the slab wood as heating. So
right.
depends, all kinds of variables there. So the mud saw, kind of transitioning in there. We're going to turn our set works on. Swing the debarker out of the way. Top the blade, pick up and come back. Now we can leave that slab on, it's not going to hurt. Drop it down to the next cut. Blade tension staying good.
Grab that.
Now we do have to watch out, the material could actually fall down on the cat track. So we wouldn't want this to fall in here.
Right.
We could break that. Talking about the flat side down. When you have the flat side down, you can actually take a tape measure and measure from the bottom up. That's when we use pattern cut. When the round part of the log is down, that's when we use auto down. We set the blade to where we want our opening cut. Then we press the button so it says, okay, the next cut's going to be 1 inch thick.
Okay. Yeah. So now we're working from the bottom up, basically. Well, it's working from the bottom up.
Yep, it's calibrating every cut from the bottom up. We're not sawing from the bottom up, but we're just going to lower it down here. Okay, so now we hit pattern cut, and now it's going to figure every cut 1 inch from the bottom cut to the top cut. Now again, you could actually put in a 4x4 here if you didn't want your lower grade material out of the center. But you can see, okay, we have a little bit of a cut there, we'll take that. And then, well, we can't. Blade tension's good, everything looks good, we're ready to go. Every time you cycle the key, the Accusat goes back to manual mode, so you have to.
What about the blade return?
It'll stay right there. Yep. So when you hear that, we're going to turn off this. checking to make sure there's no sawdust or no bark between the log and the deck or the bed rails. And this is not, I'm pretty sure there wasn't anything, and I'm listening for the noise, but this is an easy way to doing that with the toe boards.
Right.
You just kind of look under there, get your hand, clear that up. But a lot of times with white pine, there's a lot of,
Or even a piece of bark or something to be.
yeah, and that just makes your lumber inaccurate. Now we can also use our toe boards to move our can around. So we can push this forward,
Right.
push it back. I don't want to push it off the bed rails, but it makes it really easy. You can actually set your loader out here. I know you have a lot of equipment, but you were doing a beam, you roll it right out there on your forklift. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
really, toe boards really work well.
So the clamp, we can actually come into the log.
We can actually pull out a little bit of stress just by the clamp pulling down.
Right.
Use that action. And again, this log's pretty heavy, so there's not much there. So
If you've got a little bit coming off the rail because of stress, you could just pull her down a little if you need
come in
be.
against the log and bump it down just to,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you can kind of see it's touching all the bed rails, but there is a possibility that we could have stress in there, and it would show up there between the wood and the bed rail.
Right.
So now we're on our third side, and it's ready for you to run now.
All right.
So the engine's off, which is good. And then start it.
I was just asking Marty what this, what's that?
So your last cut is 1 inch. This is 7/8 from the bed rail, this pin. And that pin at the front bed rail and the rear bed rail, they're welded on. But trying to get these exactly to adjust, we put a bolt in here, and then we have the clamp that actually kisses that. So you could, if this got out of adjustment, you could adjust that so it hits the can on all locations.
I got
If you put the side supports up, it pushes in about 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And then your clamp over here, remember half the distance of what we're sawing to clear that 1 inch.
All right, so I made a few cuts. I was telling Marty, one thing I have to get used to, I don't have to walk beside this mill. I about ran into the controls there the first couple times. You're used to, as soon as you start moving, you have to. But I like this setup a lot. I have a lot to learn, but the log turner, all the fully hydraulic is just so nice. You know what I mean? And I'll get onto it pretty quick, but you have been a huge help coming out here. And I think this video is going to be very helpful for other guys, no matter what mill they have, really. But really appreciate it, Marty.
Oh, no problem.
You're a wealth of knowledge.
So anytime you need me, you know how to reach me. So
yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to years of use out of this mill. The first one was a great mill, served its purpose, but that was kind of a test to see if this is something that I really like to do before I make this kind of an investment here, and it is. So I look forward to it.
Definitely a nice machine.
Well, I appreciate it, Marty. I'm going to put a link to your website in the description for anyone in the East here. And if
I
anyone's
don't have a personal website, so just if you go to woodmizer.com, you can find my contact information in there. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Marty.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Yep.